What is up, guys? It is the Bluebloods here, back with another live stream, man. It is just your boy tonight. B-Dub's off helping some family members, move, and he's out of town right now. So it's just me holding down the fort tonight here for the Blue Bloods. And we are back with another conference preview, man. We told y'all we're probably going to do 2 to 3 live streams a week, starting from last this week on to the season, man. We got so many conferences to cover. Like I said, man, we're one of the only YouTube channels, only podcasts who cover every level of college football. So we have a lot of conferences to cover, a lot of ground to cover before the season, man. So you can tune in right here and get all your college football needs right here on the Blue Bloods, man. And so I want to start out by saying, if you haven't checked out our AAC preview, we stream that Wednesday night live on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. You can find the live recaps on any of our social media, our YouTube channel. It's all up here. The Blue Bloods on YouTube, the Blue Bloods, the underscore Blue Bloods on Twitter, and the underscore Blue Bloods on Facebook, I believe. So shout out to y'all for tuning in tonight, man. I am so pumped. I'm so excited to be with y'all tonight as we cover the Sun Belt. So as we go through this, man, we're going to cover, the first thing I want to talk about is how the college football expansion might impact the Sun Belt and why we could see some Sun Belt teams jump up to the Power Five, possibly, and or get better opportunities due to the college football expansion and the conference expansion that we're going to be talking about. So that'll be the first topic tonight. Then we're going to highlight some sleepers in the Sun Belt. These are teams that not a lot of people are looking at as favorites that could really shake things up if a certain thing happened or certain players stepped up. Then we're going to get to our players to watch in the Sun Belt and the top games for the conference, the ones that I'm looking most forward to, whether that be non-conference and or conference play. So we're going to cover that as well. And then we're going to go into my official predictions for the Sun Belt for the 2021 season. So comment your opinions in the comment section, and we'll address any questions that you may have and or any thoughts or opinions that you might have on the Sun Belt for the 2021 season. So I want to start with the topic I mentioned before, and that's how will this college football expansion play into the Sun Belt? How will it impact the Sun Belt? And what it could do actually is really allow some teams to get opportunities that otherwise they probably would have never gotten. And, I'm thinking about maybe a Coastal Carolina, an App State, one of these big teams that is constantly winning the conference, constantly competing with Power Five teams when they schedule them. These teams could be looked at as teams you can add to your conference to get the number up, teams you can give a chance at the next level. And, I really, honestly, Appalachian State is one of the most interesting development stories, whatever you want to say, because honestly, I do think they could make an impact in the ACC if they got added, if you gave them a few years to develop. They're a team that already has the experience of jumping from the FCS level to the FBS level. They're recruiting. They compete with Power Five teams every time you put them up against, one of these teams. In 2019, they upset both North Carolina and South Carolina in the same year and did it in a pretty impressive fashion, where the South Carolina game, you came away saying that App State probably was the better team overall in that game. And so for me, that's so impressive. I'm so interested to see how that development shapes. So, I mean, if you're in here, man, comment below. Do you think somebody from the Sun Belt could get picked up? And then there's also been rumors of a CUSA Sun Belt merger in which both of these conferences merged together to make one super conference. And I'd be really interested in that, especially because you could get some of those CUSA teams that I think fit geographically. You look at like a Southern Miss or something like that, where I think it would be a strong addition to the conference. And what it would do is give you the top teams from the CUSA and the top teams from the Sun Belt, and they could compete for that, the number 5 and number 6 conference championship spot in the playoffs, as that's going to expand to 12 as well. So I really think the Sun Belt is in a good position with expansion. You could see some of the top members maybe getting a shot as at a Power Five conference, and or you even could see the CUSA and Sun Belt merge together and really help improve both of these conferences. So I'm very, very interested to see how this works out for the Sun Belt. But I want to get to the sleepers in the Sun Belt. Which teams are kind of being overlooked right now, and which teams could play spoiler to some of the favorites that we all know and we've all talked about in this conference. And I want to start in my home state of Alabama with the Troy Trojans. I am so interested to see how Chip Lindsey and this Trojan team really approaches the 2021 season after two, I would say, below average seasons in his first 2 years. And last year, you could probably chalk it up to youth and also the COVID year. It's a very hard time for a young coach like Chip Lindsey to really make noticeable improvements when he didn't have an all season. The recruiting was just all online. And with a place like Troy, it's really hard to recruit just from a distance. You would love to have those kids on campus interacting with the players, interacting with the staff. And so this is going to be so interesting. And you look at this team, they were so young and now they've matured to the point where I think those close games that you could look at last year, like the one score losses to Coastal Carolina, Middle Tennessee, Georgia Southern, Georgia State, all those games were one loss, were one score losses. Troy has suffered those close losses because when you have a young team, when you have a lot of inexperience, it's really hard to win those close games. And so now that they've matured, now that they've been in those close games, I think they're going to have the experience to really probably make an impact and shock some people, especially if you let them hang around in the later rounds or anything like that, or in the later quarters in the latter part of the game. They could really surprise some people. I really like how their schedule lays out. Southern, which is going to be a tough, SWAC opponent, but I think Troy can get a W there. Southern Miss, Louisiana Monroe are both going to be games that I think they should win and probably be favorites in. And that's three of their first four games. Liberty, though, is one of those early matchups that I'm very curious. How does Troy handle Malik Willis coming in, being so dynamic, being so explosive, and Liberty's returning a lot of talent? Hugh Freeze has that team playing out of its mind. And this was a team that was top 15 last year at times. This team is going to be a contender. I'm so excited to see how it plays out for Troy down the stretch here. And I really, really like Troy as my number one sleeper. Appalachian State and Louisiana-Lafayette are both at home for the Trojans. So I really like how that lays out for them. And Coastal Carolina on October 28th, they have to go up there and face the Chanticleers. And that is going to be the biggest test for whether Troy can live up to the sleeper image that I've kind of laid out here for them. Carlton Martel and Will Cholo are really going to be the leaders of that defense. We had Will Cholo on the podcast. He's excited. He's confident in this defense. And that's going to give them a pretty solid front seven. But in terms of the offense is where I have a lot of questions about Troy. Now, the offensive line, I'm very confident. I think Troy is going to have one of the better offensive lines in the Sun Belt. But there's some huge questions that I have about the running back and wide receiver position for the Trojans. Chip Lindsey is one of the best offensive minds in college football. He's a disciple, or, his mentor was Gus Malzahn when he was offensive coordinator at Auburn. He's going to have to flex some of that offensive muscle, that offensive creativity. And if Troy can muster just an above average offense, I honestly think the Trojans can go out and compete for that Sun Belt East title. And I'm so interested to see how Chip Lindsey gets this unit to the forefront of the Sun Belt, where Troy has historically been. Now they've taken a step back these last two seasons. I think they are a sleeper just because of the history, the culture there. And now this young team that we've seen these past 2 years has all that experience. They've been through the close battles, and what that does is prepare them to make a run. And so Troy is a team I'd pay a lot of attention to. And so My other sleeper is a weird sleeper, and it's not one that I think can win the conference. But what I think they can do is make a stronger run, have a much better season than a lot of people are expecting. And that is Texas State, the Texas State Bobcats. And I know a lot of people are like, what? Look, Jake Spavital, I understand it's been a tough few years under him, 5-19, but 6 of their last 10 losses have been by single digits. It's the same boat as Troy. There's a lot of close losses, a lot of lessons learned for this young team, and now they return Brady McBride at quarterback, who I think has a lot of potential. He has to be a little bit more consistent, and he has to avoid the turnovers and be a bit more explosive. His number one target in Marcel Barbie is back at wide receiver. He had over 10 touchdowns last season, and I'm very excited to see how he plays this upcoming year. But then the wide receivers, I'm not worried about. But the question is the consistency in running the football. Now, can that happen? Listen, Calvin Hill has a lot of potential, in my opinion. I really like him as a running back, but I want to see him take that next step. I want to see if he could and if he can almost carry this offense when the passing game takes that step back, or they run into a very dynamic secondary that game planned efficiently. Can Hill carry Texas State when he's needed? That is my biggest question with Texas State. And also, can they shape just the history of this program? It's historically not been a very it's not been a winning program. So can the players get past that? That's always a huge question. But I really like where Texas State sits. I really like their defense, their secondary with Jerome Morris and Tony Legford Jr. I really like both of those guys. Legford at safety, Morris at the cornerback. And Morris is probably one of the best defensive backs. We had him on the show. I'm so excited to see what he does this year. I want to see a better pass rush, though. The defensive line ranks the worst in the Sun Belt, according to Pro Football Focus and a lot of other preseason magazines. Nick McCann comes in. He could probably make an immediate impact at that edge spot. But other than that, who is going to be on those third and longs, those third and intermediate when you need a play made on the defensive line? Who is going to step up for Texas State? Very, very, I guess, interested in that. They have such a tough road ahead. Baylor week 1 is going to be an interesting measuring stick. They go into Baylor and get the doors blown off of them, and that's not going to be a great look. But if they could stick in that game, make it competitive for the most part, I'm going to be very impressed. FIU could be a big confidence boost. I don't like what Florida International really has returning. And so I think Texas State can get a great morale win there. And the rest of their schedule, you got to get through the Sun Belt, man. You have to show us that you can win these close games. It's all good in the preseason to say, yes, we've learned our lesson. We've learned how to win. But until you win, I just need to see it, because what I'm worried about happening is you get into a close game and you lose it. And then you get in that mindset of, man, can we really win the close games? And that's what I'm worried about with Texas State. But I do like what they have just on paper. I like Jake Spavital as a coach. I think he's very underrated. A lot of people sleep on what he's bringing to the Bobcats roster team, building a culture there. So Texas State, the Troy Trojans are my 2 sleepers in the Sun Belt. Troy is a sleeper to win. Texas State is a sleeper to probably cause some chaos and upset some people. And so I want to move on here, man. And y'all comment below who y'all sleepers are, players, anything like that while you're watching, man. If you got any opinions you want to share, we'll share them up on the screen. But for players to watch, that's where I want to go to next. And I have one that I'm so excited to talk about. And he's probably one of my favorite young players, I would say, in college football. And he won the Sun Belt Player of the Year last year. That is Grayson McCall, Coastal Carolina quarterback. I am so pumped to see what this guy can bring to the Chanticleers offense in year 2. He was probably the breakout player of the year last year, and I think he has the potential. And I mean, I'll put it on wax, and you guys can let me know what you think. I think Grayson McCall has the ability to be a top 3 quarterback in the country by the end of the year. Right now, I would probably have him somewhere in the probably 6 to 10 range is probably where I would have him ranked right now. But I think he has the potential to be much, much better there. And so when you look at what he did last year, man, he completed almost 70% of his passes for over 2,500 yards, 26 passing touchdowns, only three interceptions, three turnovers, ran for over 500 yards, and also had 7 rushing touchdowns. I mean, just listen where he ranks in the country. He led the Sun Belt in passing yards, passing touchdowns, passer efficiency, and total yards per play. So he's so explosive. And I just really like his confidence, his swagger on the field. And, when I watch his game, he has the ability to pick a defense apart through the air, but he also has the ability to be dynamic enough with his legs where if you just sit back in coverage and drop 8 and get no pressure and you don't leave a spot, he can absolutely burn you with his legs. And I just love to see it out of this kid. And last year, he had the second highest as a freshman, the second highest passing grade by Pro Football Focus for a group of 5 quarterback in the history of Pro Football Focus. He only ranks behind Zach Wilson. That's how good this kid played last year. And he had the 7th best big time throw rate. So he's pushing the ball down the field. He can make those explosive throws that you need to stretch the back end of the defense. And on the flip side, he had the 5th lowest uncatchable pass rate, which just shows how dynamic he is and how accurate he is and how efficient he is with the football. I love this kid so much, and I love his game, and I wish he was, my team's quarterback for sure. He graded out, guys, by Pro Football Focus with a 97 in deep ball passing. He also graded out at above a 90 on intermediate. His lowest grade was behind the line of scrimmage. That's how good he is. This guy is a gunslinger. He has the athleticism to make big time plays on deep balls. This is passes beyond 20 yards. He threw for over 600 yards, 9 touchdowns, and 1 interception. I just want to let that sink in. This guy was that good, in which he literally was so efficient on deep balls that it just doesn't make any sense to me how good he was throwing the deep ball. And on intermediate passes, he threw for over 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns, and only 1 turnover. That doesn't even make sense to me, man. That is so impressive what he's doing on the field and everything like that. So I want to get some highlights. Listen, because I feel like I talk a lot about how good he can be. I really want to pinpoint what I'm talking about on film. So I got some highlights from his year last year. Let me pause this. So this is a highlight from the Cure Bowl against Liberty. And I just want y'all to watch just this throw is not a throw every quarterback in college football can make. And I just want you to watch, 1, his ability to escape the pressure, and 2, his accuracy and ball placement on this throw right here. He escapes the defensive end on the run, turns his hips, gets the ball there, and puts it on a dot. It's a little bit behind the receiver. He kind of had to turn to get it, but he puts the ball in a spot where the wide receiver can catch it. The DB couldn't really make a play on the ball, and he did it all while escaping to the pocket, and he was able to, on the run, flip his hips, get his body turned to the wide receiver, and throw a dot to the back of the end zone for a huge touchdown. And I'm just so impressed. I want to watch it one more time with y'all, but just look, he gets out of the pocket, flips his hips, and throws just a laser down the field for a touchdown. I was so impressed with this play, and I get there was a lot of other things that happened in the Cure Bowl that Coastal Carolina fans might not want to remember, but I was so impressed with that throw. And then you want him to run the ball, right? I talked about his running ability outside the pocket. Watch this play right here. He brings the guy in motion, and this is what happens when you don't put a spy on him and you don't get a pass rush. He steps up in the pocket, has the athleticism to make a guy miss, and just look when he gets in the open field. His ball carrying ability, he can take it all the way to the house if you don't put a spy on him. I'm going to back it up here. I mean, this kid is so dynamic. What he just steps up in the pocket and knows the exact play to make, and they can make DBs miss in the open field and outrun everybody. It is so impressive what he's doing on the field. And that was as a freshman, first year starter. Then watch this throw. Hang on. I'm going to back it up. He throws this ball. This throw he makes right here is one of the most ridiculous throws I think he made all last year. Let it play through. So he runs a deep post. The wide receiver gets over the top of the safety, and he puts it only where that wide receiver can catches it. I mean, look at the throw for a true freshman to make this throw in this game is outstanding. I mean, just look at the ball placement on this deep ball right here. He just drops it in the bucket, and he allows the wide receiver to keep running for a touchdown. And this play also too right here. Watch, he just has that instinct. Like, look, just go get it. He has it. He doesn't care. Most quarterbacks would have slid, would have tried to avoid the contact. He was going to go for the end zone. I love his attitude, his swagger. We've already went through all the stats, the accolades that this kid has. This kid's a baller, and I am so excited to see what he can do this year. Now, just one last time, man. We got to give him credit. This was in the first game of the year against Kansas. He just says, "I'm going to the end zone," and they end up beating Kansas. They end up pulling off the big upset. I love Grayson McCall's game. I think he is by far probably one of the best players in the country, not only the Sun Belt. And I am so excited to see him play. And that brings me to another guy, and that is Demetrius Taylor, Appalachian State edge rusher. We had him on the show, man. This guy is this is the perfect example of a super senior who should have been playing in the NFL this year. He's back at Appalachian State, 113 total tackles, 35 and a half tackles for loss, 19 and a half sacks, 9 pass breakups as a edge rusher, 9 pass breakups, 5 forced fumbles, and a touchdown in his first 4 years with the Mountaineers. Top 10 in Sun Belt history in both sacks and top 15 in his career in tackles for loss. This guy is just so, I mean, being 290 pounds, he should not be able to move like he does. He has the athleticism, the strength to beat almost any offensive lineman off the ball. And he would get that with his size. Like at 290, of course, he's going to be able to out physical people on the line of scrimmage. But what he does is use his quickness, his athleticism to beat them. And it just makes him a matchup nightmare if the offensive lineman's having a bad day. Listen, he graded out at a 90-plus pass rush grade by Pro Football Focus, had a 21% pass rush win rate for the entire season. Appalachian State lost a lot on the back end of the defense, and that's a big question mark for Appalachian State. But I think Taylor and this defensive line are absolutely going to be able to carry this team. And I am so excited. He's going to make a run at 10-plus sacks. And I pull some of his highlights too. I want to go through just how athletic he is. And so this is from the UNC game. This is one of those games in 2019 where they pulled off the upset. It did some big things. So just watch. He's going to get chopped. So they're going to try to chop block him or cut him. And what he does is fight through the cut and then get a screen pass for an interception, and then has the athleticism to take it back a little bit. I mean, the effort here is crazy. They try to cut him. He doesn't allow it and gets right in the way of the screen pass. And then he's able to have enough athleticism to get the pick and take it back down the field. And for a defensive end to show this effort, this athleticism, that's what makes this guy so special. And then, I want to talk about his quickness off the ball too. This next highlight is insane. For almost a 300-pounder, look at that. That is unfair. That running back didn't even stand a chance in that play. I mean, this guy blows my mind every time I see him. Look how quick he hits the gap. The offensive lineman didn't even have a chance to get a hand on him. He blew right through this dude, and it wasn't even close. And then this next highlight, look at that. The ball just snaps, and he's already past the offensive lineman right there. He's number 9 right there. And look, he just blows right through and grabs the running back. There's no chance there for you to make that block as an offensive lineman with him getting off the ball on a snap. And he's 290. He's strong as an ox, and he can use the strength even if you get your hands on him. But his athleticism and explosiveness off the ball is really what separates them from other defensive linemen. And so, before we move on, I want to highlight one more player, and that's Jalen Tolbert. He's kind of my honorable mention here. Listen, I know South Alabama has a lot of holes, a lot of people are worried about, but this guy at wide receiver, I mean, he's going to probably be the best receiver in this conference by leaps and bounds out of Mobile, Alabama, man. Almost 100 catches for over 1,600 yards. He's averaging almost 18 yards per catch for his career and has 14 receiving touchdowns. He ranked 7th last year in the entire country in receiving yards and had over 1,100 yards receiving in only 11 games. It was outstanding. And I think Tolbert could probably be the number one receiver at almost any school in the country. And this allows South Alabama to keep that offense extremely dynamic, stretch the field consistently. The run game has not been great for South Alabama these past few years, but Tolbert being able to keep this offense afloat in the big games and being able to be that big play threat when they need him is why Jalen Tolbert is one of my favorite players to watch on Saturdays, man. He is just so explosive. His route running is crisp, and he just always catches the ball. You don't see him drop many balls. He ranked first in the country, tied with Devontae Smith at Alabama for the most catches 20-plus yards down the field. It was absolutely outstanding, and I was so impressed with how he played last season. I think he's going to make a strong run at the Biletnikoff if he can put up those stats in a full season with the full offseason to prepare. He's probably going to be one of the odds-on favorite along with Grayson McCall to be that Sun Belt Offensive Player of the Year. So watch out for Jalen Tolbert. I'm so impressed with this kid, and I really, really like what he's going to bring to the table. And so that brings us to games to watch. My last topic before we get to my official predictions. And I picked a few non-conference games and I picked a few conference games. And the first non-conference game I want to talk about is one that the Sun Belt team doesn't necessarily need to win, but what it could do is set them up, especially in this age of conference realignment, to really have a real argument to expand and be in contention for some of these big openings that are going to be coming with the super conferences. And that's Appalachian State versus Miami. And why this is important for Appalachian State is you already have signature wins over Michigan. You had a signature win over North Carolina and South Carolina in 2019. If they can pull the win over a Miami team who's probably going to be top 15 going into preseason, man, it's going to be real tough to keep Appalachian State in the Sun Belt. I'm not going to lie. And it's going to be a huge confidence booster for the Mountaineers week 2 in Hard Rock Stadium down in Miami Gardens. If Appalachian State can somehow find a way to upset the Hurricanes, you're going to be talking about who's going to win the Sun Belt at that point. You got Coastal Carolina, you got App State, who just knocked off Miami. And I don't want to hear anything about App State's not going to beat Miami. Every single time they've jumped on the last 3 times they've jumped on the field with the Power 5 team, they've won. That includes North Carolina, who's at the top of the ACC this year. That includes South Carolina in the SEC. Appalachian State can't be counted out of any game. Miami returns a lot of starters, but they still have some holes. They have some question marks on that offensive line. App State returns one of the best defensive lines in the Sun Belt. The only question with App State is the quarterback. Zach Thomas has been outstanding at quarterback for them. But now that he's off, they bring in a transfer in Chase Bryce out of Clemson, and that is the biggest question mark. Can Bryce be better than he was at Duke? And can he be better than he was as the backup at Clemson? That's the big question mark. And then on the flip side, for a conference game that's going to mean the world, it's the Sun Belt Championship that never happened. Last year, Coastal Carolina was going up against Louisiana-Lafayette in the Sun Belt Championship, and it just never came about because of the COVID. I think one of the teams got COVID. I'm blanking on which one. But Coastal Carolina, Louisiana-Lafayette, October 2nd is going to be huge in terms of deciding who's going to take a strong lead for this conference, who's going to be the favorite to win the conference. And I honestly think Coastal Carolina and Louisiana-Lafayette might be the single most important game in the Sun Belt this year. So October 2nd, Pay very close attention to that game because it's really going to determine a lot in terms of who takes a strong lead in the Sun Belt. And then we have we have another out of conference game that I mentioned earlier, and that's Texas State Baylor. And the reason this is important is because it's almost for like the perception of the Sun Belt. Like Texas State needs to be somewhat competitive in this game. I don't think they have to win it, but I want to see what Texas State can do against the Baylor team, who's going to be at the bottom of the Big 12. And Dave Aranda, this is probably his first full year, and he'll probably take a huge step forward in terms of what he can bring to the Baylor program. But this team was very bad last year. This team got smacked around by a lot of people. And what I want to see is, can Texas State at least be competitive with Baylor? They can. That's a huge step forward for the Sun Belt and in terms of the perception of the conference and Texas State as a whole, saying, man, we can hang with these guys. We can make an impact early in the season and kind of set them on that sleeper, I guess, path that I put them on to start the show with. And then the final game is Appalachian State, Louisiana-Lafayette. Listen, this one is huge. This one is going to be an absolute barn burner. October 12th, App State has something to prove, especially after having their title taken from them last season, while Louisiana-Lafayette feels like they got robbed last year. There's a strong feeling down there in Louisiana that if they would have gotten a shot at Coastal Carolina in December, which they should have until COVID canceled the game, there's a strong feeling in Louisiana that if they would have got a shot at Coastal, they would have been the Sun Belt champions last year. And so they feel robbed. App State lost their title last year, so they're motivated. This game is going to determine so much in terms of who takes the lead for the Sun Belt, especially if Louisiana-Lafayette can win that game against Coastal Carolina on October 2nd. Then it becomes even bigger for both, because if Louisiana-Lafayette wins, they take a commanding lead for the favorite in the Sun Belt. And if App State wins, they take a lead over Coastal and get a one-up on them and get that little bit of cushion that they need to get late into the season. So App State and Louisiana-Lafayette, October 12th, is going to be the game to watch in the Sun Belt, man. And I'm so pumped to see that game. And Coastal Lafayette on October 2nd is going to be right there with it, man. Those two conference games are going to mean everything for the Sun Belt, and I'm so pumped to see it. But let's get into some predictions, man, as we wrap this episode up, man. Appreciate y'all tuning in today. We're going to start with the West. We are going to start with the West predictions. I'm going to count it down 5-1, and then we're going to go to the East, count it down 5-1, and then I'll give y'all my overall conference champion. And in last place for the Sun Belt West, man, I have Louisiana Monroe. And I know Louisiana Monroe fans probably not going to be happy with me, but this team, man, that they just need a complete overhaul. This team's so far behind the rest of the conference that, I mean, they rank one of the worst teams just in the country as a whole. They have a 0% chance to win the title according to like multiple predictors, and they have a brutal schedule. They get Kentucky week 1. They get the Deion Sanders Jackson State train rolling in week 2. Then they get Troy and Coastal back to back. This very well could be 0-2, and then you draw Liberty as another out-of-conference game. Good luck with Malik Willis and that top 15 team. And then you still have LSU, Appalachian State, and Louisiana-Lafayette on your schedule. This schedule is brutal. They rank as the 127th team in the country. They rank in the bottom 2, last or second to last in every positional ranking that you can find in the Sun Belt. Louisiana Monroe is not there, and so I've got them last place in the Sun Belt West. Then fourth, this is a tough one. I have South Alabama here. I have questions on their quarterback. I got definite questions on their defense, man. Outside of Keith Gallman and in some of those guys, I don't have a lot of confidence in this South Alabama defense to really improve. They rank 122nd in the country out of 130 FBS teams. Outside of Jalen Tolbert, I'm not confident in what they have on the offensive side of the ball. Southern Miss is going to be a tough week 1 matchup. I'm interested to see the Alcorn game week 3, because Alcorn is going to come in ready to fight, especially after not playing last year in the SWAC. Louisiana Lafayette follows them week 4, And then you still have this is like the death path for South Alabama. You get Troy, Appalachian State, Tennessee, and Coastal Carolina your last 4 games. You're going to be a heavy underdog in all those games. And I just find it really hard for South Alabama to have enough wins to really be at the top of the Sun Belt West this year. And for 3, I have Texas State here at number 3. This was one of my sleeper teams, and I think 3 is a lot higher than a lot of people had them. A lot of people don't love what they have coming in, but I already laid out why they're a sleeper. I think Jake Spavital is going to have this team ready to win the close games finally, and I really think Texas State will shock some people. So I have them at 3. And then at 2, I have Arkansas State. And this is probably a no-brainer. I would feel like a lot of people probably, definitely feel like this team is the one. And then with Lane Hatcher at quarterback, I really like him there. And then their wide receiving core is one of the best in the conference, but their running game and their defense are the biggest question marks for me. And when you have to compete with Louisiana-Lafayette and that explosive offense with Levi Lewis that they're going to bring, I find it very hard that you're going to be able to pull out a conference win. And they have one of the toughest schedules in the conference. You get the Memphis game where you pull one of the best AAC teams who's looking to rebound. You get Washington week 3. You get Tulsa week 4. So that's 3 tough games in a row to open up your schedule. You get Coastal and you get Louisiana-Lafayette back-to-back in October, and then you still have to go play Appalachian State on November 8th. I just think Arkansas State is just a step behind the top contenders. They'll have a strong second place finish in the Sun Belt, but honestly, I don't see how they even have a chance to win the West. And so the West winner, which comes as no surprise to probably anybody, is Louisiana-Lafayette. This team, I'm so impressed with the job that this coaching staff and everybody has done here. Levi Lewis is one of my favorite players to watch. He's so dynamic on the ground. He's accurate with the football. And I honestly think the only question mark is how do you replace Elijah Mitchell and Trey Ragas at running back? That's the only question. Receiving is probably a bit of a question too, but that defense is going to be one of the best in the country. You have Zion Hill on the defensive line. You have Braylon Trahan at safety. This defense is there. The coaching is there. Everything about Louisiana is ready to win the title. And so they're going to win the West, get to the Sun Belt Championship once again, and we'll get there in a second. But for the Sun Belt East, I have Georgia Southern. I just think their offense and what they do is just not going to work. The quarterback position is a big question mark. Their receiving core is just not that good. And really, outside of Derek Canteen and Darrell Baker at corner, their defense has a lot of question marks. Maybe CJ Wright on the interior defensive line. But I don't see it, man. Arkansas, Louisiana-Lafayette, Arkansas State, Troy, all back-to-back is going to be a brutal run. Coastal Carolina is tough, and then you still get BYU and Appalachian State. I just don't see Georgia Southern having a great year. I just think they're a step behind everybody, man. And then for my number 4 team, got Georgia State. I know this was probably a little bit of a shock, but I really think Georgia State is going to have a better year this year. I think their defensive line is probably number 1 or number 2 in the Sun Belt. I really like what they bring there. They do have a tough schedule, though. Army, UNC, Auburn, and Appalachian State are 4 of their first 5 games. That's going to be a tough stretch. But in terms of conference schedule, I do like their chances to get a few wins, get enough to get out of the cellar of the Sun Belt East. So I like Georgia State at number 4. Number 3 falls my other sleeper, and that was Troy. I really wanted to put Troy second. Appalachian State is going to be real tough to pass up for the next spot. Appalachian State and Coastal Carolina are 2 teams who I think are just a step above Troy. I think they're going to have a better season than what they've had the first 2 seasons under Chip Lindsey. I love their front 7 on the defense. I do have some questions about the back end. Their offensive line's there, but what can Chip Lindsey pull some magic out on the offensive side of the ball and get Troy to that next level offensively? That's the biggest question for Troy as they fall at number 3. And then number 2, Got to have Appalachian State here, man. I listen. I love Demetrius Taylor. I love everything about this team, man. I think the running game's going to be there. I think the wide receiver, the D line, the O line, the secondary, everything's going to be there. The only reason I have Coastal right now above them is quarterback. I don't have faith in Chase Bryce. If they have Zach Thomas came back for one more year, I probably would have had Appalachian State ahead of Coastal. But I think quarterback's the most important position. I don't know how efficient their quarterback is going to be this year, so that's the only reason Appalachian State falls. I think they got tough games at Miami. They still got that Louisiana-Lafayette game. They got Coastal on the schedule. They got Troy. Those are going to be the tougher games for them. But right now, I think Appalachian State comes like one game short from really winning the Sun Belt East, which leaves Coastal Carolina. And they're gonna. I think they repeat as Sun Belt East champions. I think when you look at their schedule, the Citadel's a winnable game week 1. Kansas, you could probably pull the upset there again week 2. Buffalo just lost their coach and a lot of transfers. That's probably winnable. UMass is winnable. And then if you get past Louisiana Lafayette and Appalachian State, I don't know if anyone can touch you. They have a very good shot of going undefeated again. I don't think the strength of schedule is there to really make a realistic playoff push, but they could absolutely find themselves in a New Year's Six Bowl if things pull right. But I really do think Coastal Carolina wins the East, which brings us to the championship game. Coastal Carolina versus Louisiana Lafayette. I have Coastal Carolina coming out of the Sun Belt, man. I just think have the best quarterback in the conference. They have the best receiving core in the conference. And I honestly think they probably have the best secondary in the conference, headed by Jordan Strong at DB. This team is just so complete. I like Isaiah Likely at tight end. Grayson McCall have already been through it. I think is light years above any other quarterback in this conference right now. And so I really do like Coastal Carolina to win another Sun Belt title this year. I'm so pumped to see this conference play out. I'm so pumped to see the Chanticleers and what they can do. But right now, I have the Chanticleers just a little bit better than anyone else in the conference. I think Louisiana Lafayette is going to give them a strong run in the title game. But right now, I have Coastal Carolina as my Sun Belt champion. So, man, I appreciate y'all tuning in on this Saturday night. We definitely appreciate it, man. B-Dub will be back next week, man. We got some big interviews coming up next week. We got Kyan Howard out of NC, North Carolina A&T, man. He's a linebacker up there. He'll be on the show Monday. So pumped to drop that interview. We got some other big names coming next week, so stay tuned there. Make sure to subscribe now, man. 80% of y'all who watch aren't subscribed, so make sure to subscribe now. Turn on your post notifications. And we have another preview coming Wednesday and next Saturday. It's going to be Wednesday, Saturday thing all the way till the season starts. And Wednesday, man, we're kicking it off with the ACC, man. We'll have our ACC preview on Wednesday. And then next Saturday, we will have our SWAC preview. Saturday, 7 p.m. Central. Wednesday, the ACC will be 7 p.m. Central as well. That's usually our live stream time. But guys, for the Bluebloods, man, and for myself, I can't wait for the season. I know y'all can't either, man. We appreciate y'all for the support, but for your boy and the Bluebloods, man, we are out.